From Chicago, welcome to 3Degrees Discussions. I'm your host, Mike Vasquez. This is a podcast devoted to the stories behind the innovators, entrepreneurs, and leaders in the 3D printing industry.
Part of the reason we chose to go down the path of directed energy deposition is because of the flexibility. With this technology, you are blowing metallic powder where you need it. So you are not limited to building up on just a flat substrate. You can build on, curved substrates or existing parts if you're doing a repair application. So we blow the powder, and there's a laser, and the laser creates a melt pool in the substrate, and you're essentially blowing that metallic powder into that melt pool, and then the part can build up layer by layer.
That was Melanie Lang. Melanie is the co-founder and CEO of FormAlloy. Prior to FormAlloy, Melanie had over 15 years experience as an engineer and program manager with Lockheed Martin and Boeing. She holds a BS in Aerospace Engineering from the University of Illinois and an MS in Systems Architecture and Engineering from the University of Southern California. In addition to her role at FormAlloy, Melanie serves as a Women in 3D Printing ambassador and as an active member of the America Makes Executive Committee. Before we get started, head over to www.3degreescompany.com and subscribe to the podcast. Remember, you can listen to the show anywhere you download your podcast, including Spotify, Apple, Amazon, or Stitcher. All right, Melanie, thank you so much for joining the show today. I'm excited for the conversation and hear your story in the additive space. So like we do with all of our guests, we start early on at the beginning. So why don't you tell us a little bit about kind of where you're from, where you grew up, kind of what your childhood was like to kind of get you down the path of ultimately ending up in additive?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me, Mike. I know I've been listening to your podcast for a while, so I'm excited to be on it finally. I grew up in Illinois, in a very small community, small town. So all the benefits and challenges with small town. But one thing I always loved when I was growing up was space. So I had a telescope. I would look at stars, do a little bit of study of astronomy, as you can do as a child, and was really into science. And that sort of led me to pursue aerospace engineering for undergrad. And I really thought that I would spend my career, designing rockets and propulsion systems. And I really had a passion for commercial space travel. Now, this was the early 2000s, so it was before that was actually being done. So I think all that's pretty amazing. So I've just always had sort of a love and passion for space. And I had an opportunity out of college to go do some work with Boeing and then Lockheed Martin and work as an aerospace engineer. Although I wasn't really working yet on space projects, I kind of thought I would make my way over there at some point, but was very also content doing some algorithm development and that kind of thing on some other projects. But what I realized is something that I loved more than technology was people and working with people. And so I didn't see myself, sitting at my desk as an individual contributor. I saw myself as I progressed in my career being more of a team leader, that kind of thing, and just really more focusing on the people aspect of things. And so I started doing more in program management, and then ended up doing a lot of work in capture management and business development, where you're actually formulating proposals and then a win plan to go win the work, and then working with the customer to get it started up. So that was really great career, and enjoyed really every minute of it, and both great companies to work for. So I started getting into the additive space then as a hobbyist, and this is like the 2010 timeframe. And at the time it was just more of an interest. I started going to a couple maker fairs and just started thinking, hey, this is a pretty cool technology, and started playing with it a little bit at home. And my husband and I built this little polymer 3D printer just for fun. And we did that just for a couple of years without really thinking much of it, other than, we're kind of part of this maker movement and maker space, and we can make these neat little knickknacks out of plastic at home. Well, at the same time, I have all these projects going on at work, and particularly with some new opportunities. And one of the biggest challenges wasn't just the hard technology part that you think of as being a challenge. It was getting components to the right place at the right time, and the entire sustainment tail. And how do you model that? How do you support that? And what are the risks associated with the entire supply chain? And to me, that's when a light bulb started to go off, because I could go to my house and more or less print whatever I wanted, albeit out of plastic. But it really started me thinking, this is a viable solution to some of these supply chain challenges in aerospace and defense. And that's when I started changing my focus to metal technologies and started investigating the different metal technologies. And as you might know, at FormAlloy, we specialize in directed energy deposition. And what led me to that technology is that you have the ability to build parts, you can repair parts, and you can enhance components through a multi-material solution. So to me, when I have this whole supply chain tail challenge in my mind, it was an excellent technology to go, really continue to commercialize and, get into some of these hard use cases.
So kind of going back a little bit to one of your early comments on kind of gravitating more towards the people part of your job, and what was it that appealed to you specifically in terms of managing people or kind of building teams within the work that you were doing?
Well, I just thought it was really interesting that if I was able to bounce my ideas off of a larger group, the idea would really morph and change and usually end up way better than it had started with a single person. So that was really interesting to me and something I hadn't really, thought of before. And then I was also working with a pretty diverse group of individuals. Actually, I was working on an international program, so I had people from different backgrounds and all different ages kind of working together. And I just thought it was really interesting, like learning about team dynamics and just that a lot of problems that we think might be a technical problem is actually more of a people problem, just in terms of training or personalities or making people comfortable with change. So that was really interesting to me. And then I also, I just think relationships and human connection is so important. And if I'm at my desk as an individual contributor, not interacting with people, I'm missing out on a big part of the human experience for me. So that's kind of what led me to want to pursue a career that was not only technically focused, but also people focused.
And that's a good transition. So you mentioned kind of your experience at Boeing and Lockheed, kind of in this aerospace sector. Kind of what were the steps that kind of led to FormAlloy? You could dive into that in a little bit more detail.
Sure. Well, I continued to work at Lockheed while I was sort of pursuing this additive space, first as a hobbyist and then looking at it more seriously, and had to take the leap of faith as all entrepreneurs do at some point and say, this is a viable solution. I took one of our machines, our first working prototype, to Rapid in 2016. And we got significant positive feedback and even some orders for some parts and things and some research projects. So to me, that was a great signal that this is the technology that people need and they're looking for as they try to expand, size or throughput or multi-material type solutions.
And so talk about those early days and developing the machine and kind of the concept. What was that like? What were kind of the pitfalls? What were the challenges? What were your early business models that you had in mind as you started down the entrepreneurial path?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges for sure starting up. So one was having resources, both time and financial, to go buy these components and start playing around with things. And, that was really overcome by having very good time management skills and not having too much of a social life for the first couple of years, and just really cutting costs wherever possible. So the first prototype started to be built in my laundry room. And at one point, all of us had run into it and had some type of injury from either running into the machine or bumping into it or something. And that's when we decided to go rent a little 700 square foot glorified garage, essentially, to take it a little bit further. So and cash continued to be a challenge, as a new business. But that's why we were thankful for some of the companies that were early to take this technology and want to do some research with it. And they thought that we had something really special with our approach, which was not just to have a person that stands at the machine and has to have, all these details and stop it and be measuring, but have a lot of in situ monitoring control that can make the machine run repeatably and with some ease of use, so you don't have to have a PhD or material scientist running the machine. And people like that approach because if you think about taking this technology and scaling it, you have to look at the total business case, which includes the cost of the labor to run the machine, and then how much interaction the operator has to have with the machine in order to make it a very repeatable process. So that sort of helped us kick it off the ground and fund it on the early days. But we were a 2 to 2.5 person company for the first 2 years or so. And then once we started selling machines, we were able to hire a couple people every time we sold another machine. And that let us have a small staff. And then we went through a series A in 2019. And that allowed us to really accelerate our hiring and our growth.
So I'm always fascinated by kind of that first customer that you get. Can you talk about that? I mean, you don't have to name specifics if it's confidential or anything, but kind of those early conversations, like how did it end up leading to someone sending you a check?
Yeah, well, I can say that one of our first projects was with NASA, and I think if
starting small,
if you're working in a space that that NASA is interested in, they have a lot of ways to get a project funded. And we used a couple different paths to get funding from NASA and other government agencies, including the SBIR and STTR program. We had another grant, another type of NASA grant that we were funded. And then we also did just very small purchases, which was the very first way we started working with them. So we were doing very small projects that people were putting on their credit card because they were under the limit of which you would do a contract. And so I just think the willingness to adapt what they wanted to do. They said, "Hey, we have this new material we want you to try," and we said, "Sure, we'll try it." So I think you have to be willing to take risk, and you have to be willing to say yes to things to help meet the customer's challenge, and then really listen to what they're saying. So when we started out, we thought we would only sell machines and we would not do really any R&D projects or services. But what we realized from listening to our customers is that they like it when we start doing work for them, and then they have time to do some analysis on it and build up a business case and then bring the technology in-house when they're ready. And so that was something that we sort of learned also from those early days.
And that's probably helpful from a small business cash flow perspective, right? Because I mean, a sales cycle for a machine is long, right? And it's a big payoff at the end, but to fund the business, to put food on the table in a practical sense, right? Right. That timing is always daunting for an entrepreneur. Absolutely.
And that's challenging because if you go pitch to investors, they want you to be laser focused. And I don't just mean laser focused as in metal additive or DED, but what exactly are you doing in that space? So if we go into our pitch and we say, "Oh, and we're going to build machines and we're going to build OEM solutions and we're going to build services," and then they say, "Well, you have 2.5 people and you have no funding. How are you going to do that?" So it's a delicate balance because you have to keep the lights on. And so we were doing these R&D projects, and of course we're learning from that and learning about our customer challenges while we're doing that. But at the same time, we have to stay somewhat focused in order to start the conversations with investors about fundraising. So I think that's probably a pretty delicate balance that all entrepreneurs go through, where you have to do what you can to keep the lights on, but you also have to have a strong business plan and case and have a focus so you can get to the ultimate goal that you want to, which for us was to be able to sell machines.
And was going down the venture funding route always in kind of the back of your mind and in kind of the planning for the company?
Yes. And I think it takes a lot longer, I think, than people realize, and even than I realized. But we started talking about, in the future, we'll fundraise just to sort of keep people interested in what we were doing. But we did want to hold off as long as possible. So it's another one of these balance things where you want to get people excited about your technology and you want to talk about it, but you don't want to raise funds too early because I think, one, it's important to know what you really want to do first before you get that funding. And then also, the longer you can hold off, the more control you can maintain over your destiny and over your company. And then, of course, the type of investor is very important too when you're considering that.
Did you have some metrics for yourself of when you felt ready to go to that point in time?
Not really when I set out. It was sort of, I was thinking when we started, we'll probably fundraise in a year or so, close around in 18 to 24 months. And it ended up being about 3.5 years since founding, since we actually did that. And that's because we were able to continue to make a footprint in the market and get machines out there. And we were on a pretty steady growth path. Then we got to the point where, we kind of said we need to scale a little more and we need to be able to hire a chunk of people. We have some good revenue. We have some good traction in the market. So it was just sort of all the timing kind of worked out to do that. And I think the other important part of that is when you're fundraising, you don't want it to be a fire sale in terms of we're about to go out of business. And so we have to do this round. I think if you can plan to close your round, 6 months before you would get to that point, then you don't have to take a bad deal. You can say no, because just as important as it is for the investor to find a good fit is for you to find a good fit with your investor, because they're likely going to sit on your board and provide direction and sometimes even approval for what you're doing. So if you can have that balance of waiting long enough to raise funds, to have the timing be right, but not be in a point where you're in a bad situation and you have to raise, that's sort of the ideal time to raise.
Can you talk a little bit about how did you transfer kind of your love of the people side of the business at Lockheed and Boeing and some of the skills you gained there into now, hey, you've got your own company, you control its destiny. How you build your team is a very important step in that. So how did that end up playing out over some of those early days?
Yeah, I think in the early days, it was a little bit more challenging because we were, so limited on funding. So we were using interns as much as possible, which was a great way to kind of get started, because we get assistance at a lower labor rate than you would an experienced professional, and then they get experience in an up and coming field. And some of our interns have come back and worked for us full time, which has been nice as well. But that was one way that we did that. In terms of preparation for running a company, I think if you have that big company experience or even small company experience, and you've gone through challenging times and maybe some training sessions on teamwork and sales and that kind of thing that you might get from a bigger company, I think that can really help you if you're going to set out on your own journey. But I don't think anything can really properly prepare you completely for the journey. So I think it's important to have really good, mentors and support system that can you can bounce ideas off of, because I had, basically 15 years of training and experience in, some of the biggest, best companies that you can work for. And there's still many aspects that, I definitely wasn't fully prepared for or had any experience with.
Sure. And so I guess actually maybe one thing to maybe take a step back on so there's a wide range of people that listen to these episodes. So maybe can we dive into the technology a little bit more, just for those who may not be familiar with DED, and what does that mean, and how does your system work, and kind of compared to some of the other systems that might be on the market on the metal side?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mentioned, part of the reason we chose to go down the path of direct energy deposition is because of the flexibility. With this technology, you are blowing metallic powder where you need it. So you are not limited to building up on just a flat substrate. You can build on, curved substrates or existing parts if you're doing a repair application. So we blow the powder, and there's a laser, and the laser creates a melt pool in the substrate, and you're essentially blowing that metallic powder into that melt pool. and then the part can build up layer by layer. So with that, you can do multi-materials in a single build because we're just basically feeding powder in, and the machine doesn't necessarily care which powder you're feeding in. So that becomes really interesting for, like I mentioned at the beginning, enhanced performance components where, you might have something that's copper and Inconel, or stainless and Inconel, or maybe aluminum and stainless. So you can work with a really wide range of materials with this process, and also, combining different alloys together. And then, of course, custom alloys, which is sort of another specialty thing that we do at FormAlloy, which is specialty equipment that's designed for alloy development and functionally graded materials. So that's something that's distinguished us a little bit. We sort of heard from our customers some of the frustrations early on with metal AM is sort of the limited set of materials that could be run with it. And of course, now that's changed, so there's a lot more, but just material flexibility in terms of being able to change materials, or being able to even work with custom alloys, where customers might want to define what they want the properties to be for the material. And you're really not limited anymore, with this process to, traditional alloys that are available. You can really define what you want your requirements to be, how you want your part to perform, and then design an alloy based off of that. Sure. The other sort of technology aspect that differentiates us, like I mentioned, is we're very focused on process monitoring and control, so that more of a machine tool operator can run the machines, and it's not going to require a material scientist to run the machine. And in fact, in-house, when we do our work, we have machine operators that run our machines. And, it's important to be able to control that and not have a lot of operator interaction, because every time your operator touches your machine or makes a change, that process is no longer repeatable, because you will not be able to repeat exactly what that operator did, or how they did it, or when they did it. So we have some technology in place to handle that. So those are some of the differentiators and the basic technology overview.
It always blows my mind about how many moving parts there are, literally and figuratively, with building a machine business, right? Like, you've got to get physical hardware to work. There's software, there's materials, obviously. But then, like, as you get past that point where you're selling machines, it's just as much about supporting the customer and making sure that they feel like they're being heard and they can get their problem solved. And so how has that transition been over the progression of the company? Has that been a big issue, or have there been other things that have come up that, like, as you focus so much on getting that first couple machines to work really well, and then you're like, oh, but it doesn't end once it goes out the door?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think continuous improvement and innovation is always important. And, when our machines go out the door, that doesn't mean that there will not be any innovation, happening on those machines. We have many times gone back when we have a new technology that comes available, like a new mode of in situ monitoring and control. We can go back and add those to some of the previous systems that we have. So we do keep that in mind when we're developing new technologies, is the backward compatibility with the prior machines. So that way a customer that has maybe a baseline model from a few years ago can still be running the latest and greatest. And one good example of that is the new powder feeder that we released, called the Alloy Development Feeder, which is a 16 hopper system. So that allows you to deposit different alloy variations very quickly, which you can use for development, or you can use for like functionally graded components. So we made that backwards compatible by having a standalone version. So it's basically just sit on the outside of the machine and feed powder in that way. And that's really how we try to do things. So that way, we want our customers to continue to be, cutting edge and have the latest and greatest technologies. So that's sort of always something that we look at when we're developing.
And what have been some of your favorite customer projects or customer kind of applications that you can speak about?
Yeah, I'm a aerospace person at heart still. So anytime we get to work with any of the aerospace companies or commercial space companies, especially those companies that are sort of providing new access to space, so all the new space activity that's going on. That's so exciting to me because that's been something that has been a passion of mine for so long. So I always loved aerospace projects. But the other thing that gets me really excited is we get these projects of things that I would have never thought of in a million years. And, and that kind of gets down to the people side and the importance of diversity of thought and teams. We have these things come in and they're awesome applications, and we would have just never thought of them. And so I think that's important to sort of be able to have that open dialogue with your customers. And we have meetings, multiple times a week with new customers that are just sort of asking questions and exploratory. And it's awesome when the light bulb goes off for these applications you would have never thought of in sporting goods or electronics or, something that's so far away from aerospace.
So, I mean, as a small company making a machine in 3D printing space with a lot, I mean, it's not a huge amount of established players, but there are certainly a number of established names. Like, what were some of your strategies to kind of get your name out there, kind of meet people, start to get engaged with customers, and kind of get over that kind of startup hump almost as like just name recognition alone, or kind of being the new person on the block?
Yeah, I think that was a big challenge. I think first and foremost, you have to have a technology that can speak for itself, because you're not going to have a big marketing budget. Some of these larger companies, they can spend 25% or more just on marketing. And we had to take a very grassroots approach to marketing, and we had to have a technology that was important enough where people would want to come write about us and talk to us, and have us on podcasts like these, because what we were doing was really interesting. So I think that's first and foremost. You have to have something that's good and that's interesting and that's solving a customer problem. And then I think the second part of it is just back to that human side and building relationships with people and taking the time to network and building a community. And I consider many people from this additive manufacturing community as friends, even people that work for competitors. We talk on a weekly, if not daily basis. We're not sharing IP, but just building those relationships and networking, because people will move around in this industry, especially as it still somewhat emerging and growing. And so I think it's really important. And people will also remember the relationships that you formed if they're meaningful and genuine. And when they move to a different place, they might have been a competitor and now they work for a customer. And now you're doing work with someone that used to be your competitor, but they choose to work with you instead of the company that they left, because they appreciate first the technology and then second the relationship. And so I think those are both really important things to foster.
And how have you changed over the time of kind of starting the company, both in terms of kind of what you do on a daily basis, but maybe just 30,000 foot view in terms of your priorities and how you think about the additive manufacturing space and running a company and being a small business owner?
Yeah, I think I've changed a lot. I think I used to be able to have a very detailed plan and execute the plan, and there might be some slight deviations. And I think what I've learned is in a small business, there's a lot of things, especially over the past couple of years, that you can't expect and you can't plan for. And so you have to be able to be dynamic, and you have to be able to change your course if you need to. And you have to put people first when you have to sometimes make challenging decisions. You have to think about from a personal level, not only taking care of yourself, but taking care of your team. And I think if you do that, along with the good technology that you have, you will be successful. But on a day-to-day basis, again, it's similar, where I used to be very predictable day-to-day, what I would do, how it would go. I was doing strategic plans that were, several years out, and, they were pretty good, and we would be pretty close to that. And, when you're working in a small business, you're Wi-Fi goes down, all of a sudden you're an IT provider. Someone doesn't come to work because they're sick, and you're a machine operator for the day. So, definitely wearing a lot more hats, which is exciting, and can be challenging at times as well.
And so just kind of two final questions. So the first one being, kind of, as you reflect on your own career, and I mean, it's certainly not kind of right in the middle of it, but what advice would you give folks just starting out in the additive manufacturing space? Are there any kind of nuggets of wisdom that you wish you would have known kind of as you started kind of early on in aerospace, and then some of the big companies, and even starting your own company?
Yeah, I think something really important in additive is that although there are a few people that have been in additive for a long time and have spent, long careers focused on additive and were some of the early inventors, most of the people in the space are relatively new. So don't be afraid to take that leap of faith into additive. Don't be afraid to show up at women in 3D printing events or any other type of networking events in the space, because you'll find many people in additive at this point have made, I would say, a right turn into additive. You have aerospace engineers that, 10 years ago, I would have never thought that I would be in this industry. And a lot of people are like that. They were working something else, and then they sort of made a turn. Now it's becoming a little bit different because there's actually, full degree programs in the space. But I just think it's important for people to not shy away from participating and growing and even submitting abstracts for conferences, because they don't think that they're, expert enough to be there, because many of us are not experts enough to be here. We've all sort of made that change of course at some point to get here. And so that's the biggest piece of advice is, and I went through that early on. It's like, well, I'm no additive expert, I'm just sort of getting in. It's like, no, actually I am. There's, you just because you haven't been doing it for 20 years doesn't mean that you don't know anything, and you pave your own way. So that would be, I think, my biggest advice.
Awesome. And so last question, kind of as we're kind of getting into that conference season, what are you excited about for kind of the rest of the year, 2022 and onwards?
So, as you know, I'm a people person. I'm so excited to be back in action and seeing friends that I haven't seen. I got to see some over the past year, but not the same as it used to be. So I expect a lot of hugs and a lot of fun coming up, and a lot of sharing about technology. We're going to be sharing some new things that we're working on in FormAlloy, and I can't wait to hear what all of our friends and even competitors are doing too, as we all work together to sort of move additive forward and keep it going.
Awesome. Well, Melanie, thank you so much for the time today, sharing your story. And we look for all those exciting announcements and seeing you at some of these conferences and events coming up.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike.